I remember I've always had a thing for round forms, and so bottles obviously fit into that category. I remember I meant to bring some of my bottles. So well, I remember in 1969, my first ceramics class, I wanted to make one and I couldn't. Because, I mean, the teacher was an idiot. But, well, no, he's a really good potter, good artist, but he was a terrible teacher. We've all had those, right?
Yes, yeah.
They know their subject, but they're useless.
Right.
So anyway, and I remember my very first one, and I was so proud of it. And now I look back on that thing, it's like, holy crap, what a piece of boo-boo. And it took me a long time to figure these out. And even now, the bottles I'm going to be making tonight, I'm not going to go for form. It's just about technique. But if I'm making bottles at home, it's a challenge. I'm working my ass off trying to get it thin enough, trying to get the clay up and get that neck in. But there are some they're not tricks, but there are some methods that will really help all of you with bottles. And do yourself a favor. Don't start off with a 25-pound bottle. Make a 2-pound bottle. Get a feel for it. What does it feel like to bring that neck in? Try blowing it out. Oh, it collapses. Well, you only lost 1.5 pounds or 2 pounds. So start off small till you get a feel for these techniques. So first I'm going to show you what not to do and what most beginners do wrong. Also, it's a good idea not to use B-mix unless it has sand in it. Just because clay without sand is less forgiving. It's going to collapse more easily.
What are you using now? What is that?
B-mix.
Without sand.
Oh, it's sanded B-mix?
No, it has no, this has no sand.
Yeah, anything with sand is easier.
It's just preparing
No,
it
Sarah,
to collapse.
everybody's out of all this stuff. I don't know how you can be out of sand, but.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Are they? Is our rock? It's a supply chain thing.
I know it is,
Yeah.
but, you know.
And especially prepared silica, obviously silica sand. But yeah, you can. I used to buy it in a 50-pound bag, but you can't get it now.
I wonder where it comes from.
That's a fair question. What's interesting about the stuff that you buy is it's pretty uniform.
Oh, I'm sure.
I mean, it's all, yeah, it looks very uniform in color. Where beach sand, which would probably work, not so much. They could do grog, which is clay that they bisque fired then ground back up, but it's a very different feel.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Silica, it has smooth edges, grog has rough edges, so it's just a very different feel.
You feel it.
Silica is just like very, very fine beach sand.
And it comes in different meshes, different sizes. So it could be like fine beach sand, it could be coarse beach sand. Okay, so what do beginners do wrong?
Can I make you a list?
What they do is they say, okay, I want to make a bottle, but they're so used to making a cylinder of a particular shape. Okay, well, let's make a bottle, Bill. So they blow it out, and then they say, oh, time for a neck.
All sounds pretty logical to me so far.
Actually,
Okay, so it's not a neck, it's a throat.
Anyway,
Wow.
and so the more I try to bring this in, the more it's just going to collapse. Right? Okay. So don't do that. As have I.
I would have thought that was the way to do it, obviously.
It's interesting, this clay, I throw this all the time with sand, and without sand, it's very different. A lot more slip. I'm gonna make some small bottles, but the techniques don't change, except for maybe a couple, and I'll demonstrate those. You notice every time I make a pull, I set that lip. I don't care what you're making. If it's a bowl, a plate, I don't care. I want that thick. And I don't see any reason for it to ever get thin unless you want it thin at the end. This stabilizes the entire cylinder. Beginners do this, and they pinch that off, and it gets really thin, and then the top starts doing this, and then the bottom starts doing this. So if you keep this stabilized, some of my students say, your rims are so thick, until I finish the piece. At the very end, I can go and make it whatever I want. You get to the top, you stop. I never even touched that. And it stays as thick as I want it. Okay, so if you're gonna make a bottle, you have to make a cylinder that's significantly taller than it is wide. You can't make a bowl into a bottle. So I'm gonna make a little cylinder here. Sometimes I make these too narrow to get my fat hand in. Okay, so there's my cylinder, and you see how even this is a little wide, not as tall as I would like, but it's fine. But you notice that this is still really thick, and so that when I bring it in now, when I collar it in, I've got some play to move. It's not, you know how you've done this, the clay starts to buckle on you, it's getting too thin. All right, a couple of bottle tricks. You have to sort of understand what you're trying to do. What you're not trying to do is you're not trying to, as I demonstrated with the first one, you're not trying to take that cylinder and bring that neck in. If you do, what's going to happen? It's going to start to come down on you. I mean, not always, but most of the time. So what you want to do is, there's your cylinder, you want to collapse that whole top in on itself. And that really is one of the keys. If you think about this, it's not going to work. If you think about this, well, it's stable. It's going to work. It's holding itself up. Now, obviously, there's variations on that. Another thing, I'm getting ahead of myself, but as parting gifts for everybody, I brought everybody credit cards. If you don't have one of my credit cards, but
Oh, goody, where can we charge stuff?
yeah, hey, go to Starbucks, knock yourself out. But I really suggest that you learn to shape on the outside with a credit card. Now you can use a metal rib, but I think they're dangerous. I've cut myself on it. These, you're not going to hurt yourself. But what this does, it compacts the outside, the clay molecules of the walls of the pot, and it also takes moisture out of it. So you're going to be, the clay is going to be drier and stronger, as opposed to wetter and saggier. Okay. You also want to think about dividing the pot into halves or thirds. Certainly no less than thirds. So if I could don't have my mirror, which is probably a good thing, but that's about half, something in there. So if you could, this can be the body, and this can be the neck. In other words, I'm taking this model, that's out, but this whole top section is going to be the neck. I'm going to bring it in. Or you can do it 2/3, 1/3. 2/3 is probably about there. I'm just guessing, but that's something like that. So here's what I could do. On the bottom, actually, I think I'm gonna keep this open. Not my mirror, I can't see my tools. Okay, so I'm just having a weird deja vu that I've done this before for you guys. I'm sure I haven't, but it's just like,
Oh, that bothers
you are all old enough to know who Rod Serling is, so you know
Oh,
what I'm
yeah.
talking about. I'm having one of those moments.
Twilight.
Now, especially if you're just learning, don't get greedy. I mean, don't make one of those. They're the real round ones, I'll called moon jars.
No, God,
Yeah, and
this is the second time this
Yeah,
came
yeah, and Korean potters are famous for them. They're beautiful. I mean, and a sphere is the hardest shape to make, pure and simple, just because of gravity. And it's remarkable. But give yourself a break. Another thing you need to remember that if this doesn't look very blown out when you make it, remember when you trim it, you're going to bring that bottom in. And okay, watch my hand. So this is my pot. Well, if I do this, you can visually, I think you can see how that lifts that form, makes it a little bit lighter, a little more bulbous. So that's what we're talking about. Okay. Now I allowed this to get wide with my fat hands, but because I've got plenty of clay to play with here, I can bring this in. Now this is called collaring, and it's middle fingers and thumbs. There's other techniques, but that's what most people use. And so the problem that you're going to have in terms of weakness, while it can be in the body down here, it's usually going to be at the shoulder where that neck starts to come in. This is the weak spot. So you just have to take your time and be careful.
What is that doing? What is that doing?
Oh, it's a,
Sticking water up
you've
our
heard of a
butt.
hot dog on a stick? Take a guess.
Sponging the water out?
Yeah,
Yeah, sponge on a
because
stick.
if the water
Yeah,
stays in the bottom, you can't.
there's
get to it.
variations.
I mean,
You can make
that's
your
it.
own. Now I'm going to get it a little bit technical in just a second.
Good, I love it when you talk to
You reach a point where you can no longer collar it or choke it. I've got plenty of clay here, but it looks like I'm gonna have a problem with this. I'm not, but now I've got to change my hand position a little bit. So when you collar or bring anything in like that, you're thickening the walls. So that means I've got more clay to play with now. It was now thicker than it was. So now I can go back with this. Throw it. Now it's very common with bottles. It's really common for the top to end up doing this. So if it happens, it's not because you're evil. Okay, now we're going to change hand position slightly. I haven't seen this much on YouTube. I don't know why. It's one of the few things I got out of my first ceramic class. But it's a 6-point. I've seen it called the claw, but I know a lot of things that are called the claw in throwing. But I'm going to now instead of doing this isn't going to work. But I've got contact with my thumbs, this, and the sides of my middle fingers. So it's here, here, and here. So you can see thumbs are here, check. Then the sides of my middle fingers are here, and then my index fingers are there. And it's this. And you really have more, this is much more of a fine motor control position than this. When I do this, I'm trying to teach myself or remind myself as I say all this stuff. I never start right here. I always start like this, so I'm actually sort of feeling the form. So I'm not squeezing, I'm not squeezing, I'm not squeezing, and now I'm starting to squeeze. But I'm making sure that it's a continuous line with my hand. Normally, as I mentioned previously, I would be throwing with a mirror for the shape, but I meant to bring mine tonight, but I realized that it would be in your way. So anyway, so the same thing's happened again. I brought it in, and now it's thicker. Okay, let's take advantage of that. Matthew Kelly, potter one of the guys that I really admire, he talks about when he makes a bottle and he finishes the bottle and he hasn't had to cut that lip off, it's like, yeah.
I watched a video of his the other day. It was very good. He's really good.
Yeah.
And he talks it well.
So, at this point, what can I do to shape it? And if the shape's not great, well, it's not great, and I do apologize, but I can't really see it. I'm just used to doing this. But I can reach my finger in there and make sure that that curve is working for me. So I still can shape it a little bit. So now this won't work anymore. So now I'm into this. Feel the curve, and in you go. I should have given myself a little more clay to do this. Does anybody have a needle tool?
Sure.
I couldn't find one of the. See, you notice I'm constantly going back with that credit card. Thank you, dear. Getting rid of the water. With porcelain especially Coleman porcelain, if you use water, it will actually, you can see it erode the clay as it goes down. I mean, I love the clay, it's my favorite clay, but it's not very forgiving.
My husband would be very happy to see me using my credit card here instead of at the store.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, this is not what I wanted, but I'm trying to. So, let's say for the sake of argument that we're happy with this. See,
We're impressed.
you cut it off, but you're not done with that rim. There's a trick. So let's say for the sake of argument that I'm done. I'm not, but let's say that I am. Before you start to finish this or take it off, in fact, especially if this is a little, I'll do something like that. Okay, there you go. This shape was really big in the 70s and 80s. They called them weed pots, little straw flowers. I'm not old. I'm not. Cut it off at an angle, watch. What this does, it gives the lip the illusion of the whole pot being really thin.
Cool.
It's a totally different look, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now it becomes a little more graceful. All right. Okay, well, what happens if you didn't follow my directions? Come on. And you got to this point, and damn, you got nothing. You got nothing, right? What do? I got this from Ceramics Monthly a long, long time ago, and I've used it now almost at least half the time, half the bottle I made. And this is not a beginning trick, but something that's not hard to learn. It's pretty basic. You do this. So somehow I've got to get clay from here to here, right? All right. But if I do this, if I get it too thin, it's going to collapse right here, right? You with me? Okay. What I'm going to do is this. Your middle finger goes in, and so my middle finger is supporting all of this. Okay? I can feel it. I'm right there. And I'm going to push against that middle finger, but I'm not going to move the middle finger. So normally when you lift, you do something like this, right? Now I'm going to do this. And this finger is going to support that inside shape where it's likely to collapse. So I can put this and I can go. And just keep working it. Until you have enough.
So how thick do you think the wall is now? How thick do you think your wall inside is?
It's probably at least maybe 5/16. It's pretty thick. I'm making no effort to make it thin because I don't want it to collapse in the middle of the demo. So I could continue to work this, but you can see now I've got some clay to play with. I apologize for the wobble, but you get the idea. Okay? No. It's bigger. Another thing, and I've covered this in previous demonstrations, but you're right, I can get it semi-controlled pretty quickly. And I'm pushing pretty hard, so that's a lot of hand strength. But I'm very efficient at coning because I'm just not as strong as I used to be. I used to be able to muscle this. I can't do it anymore. So, I mean, I'm here, I'm using my body, I'm pulling back, so I'm using a lot of very efficient force just to bring it up into a cone. And this is, because I'm doing this, it's not that hard to do. And once I've done this once or twice, then I pretty much have it under control. They never teach this anymore, but coning was a very, very old way of centering. They just coned it till it was centered.
I think you're in the way. I'll get ready to catch. I've got a clipboard here.
Oh, yeah. Strawberry pollen mix.
It's going off.
Yeah.
Dial back. There are no bat pins. You have to bring your own if you want to use it.
Yeah.
You have bat pins? that you
If
can-
anybody
Yeah,
ever,
they're really,
you guys ever want bat pins?
Oh, I didn't know
Um,
that. That's interesting.
I've got plenty. Mine are nylon,
But how do you
Yeah,
get them
I've seen
in
those.
the?
and they're better than
You don't
these.
even have
They'll
to
still
pass
chew
them.
up your hands if you hit them.
They'll chew up your hands, but they won't chew up the bats.
Ah.
The nylon ones, the pins wear out before the bat hole does, so a new bat stays tight longer. Anyway,
Okay.
that's the theory. Now, there's a point at which, for me, we all have our comfort zones. And, I mean, for me, I don't throw hardly anymore, so my comfort zone is probably about 5 to 6 pounds, as big as I'd want to try. It's a quarter of a bag. I mean, I could do bigger, but, you know, part of my problem is I don't need anything. I mean, what am I going to do with it? Now you can see that lip wants to fold a little bit. Go slow. You do not want to do this quickly. Be really gentle with it. Start here, feel the curve, and now I'm squeezing. Oh no, the lip's getting off. Alert the media. Okay. So I've already done a lot of this, has gotten quite thick in there. So I can go back. You guys have chided me for always saying, I've never done this before. And what I'm really trying to say is, for example, when I did lids, I've never done all the lids at the same time before. It's a matter of just data, I suspect. Okay. Is it a needle tool? That's okay. I can take it.
It's there.
It's in there. I'll find it.
Here.
I can't see it. Thank you. Okay, so now I'm always going back to check the shape. In other words, this isn't too bad, not for what I want to make, but again, I'm always going back, getting rid of the slip. And you wouldn't think that's a problem, but what you're creating is you're creating a very unsupported shape here. Gravity wants to do this, and gravity wants to do this. It wants to break here, and it wants to break here. So the drier you can keep that, the more strength you're going to have in the piece when you're throwing it. So now, as I mentioned, I've reached a point where it's not working. So now I'm going to go to that 6-point thing. And when you do this, if you ever try it, you want to be looking dead center. If you do this, you're going to pull towards your eyes. So if you do this, you're going to be, and it doesn't make that big a difference later on, but for now it does.
Are you adding pressure as you get to the narrower part?
Great question. Yes, I am. So let me talk you through this. So I'm not doing anything, I'm not doing anything, and now I'm squeezing it in. So my point for doing this is to get a feel for the curve that I'm imparting in the bottom of the pot. So as I can sort of continue that. If I just go here, I'm liable to go and not do it right. I'm liable to not do it right anyway. For this one, I purposely wanted to make a long neck to show you a couple things. So I made goblets for my son's wedding, and then he didn't use them. It's a whole other issue. But when I was making them, I realized, I discovered something about making really tall, skinny necks, or in my case stems, on the goblets that I was doing unconsciously. And what I found is the narrower it got, the more perpendicular the right hand became. And I realized there's a reason for it. So you'll see, you guys can't see, but normally when I'm lifting a cylinder, I'm sort of at an angle down here, I'm lifting or whatever. But as it gets narrower, this hand doesn't change much, but this hand, the narrower it gets, the more I start doing this, until I'm to the point, as this gets thinner, I'm just making contact with just my middle finger, and it's almost a pure 90-degree angle. The reason for that is because as it gets narrow, it's going to want to torque, twist on you. By reducing the surface area, you're reducing the friction. It's pure, I mean, if I do a knuckle lift, and Matthew, God, what's his name? Starts with a C. But to explain how he makes these huge porcelain bottles, you know what a weed burner is? It's like a big long blowtorch that they use to burn weeds off. So he'll blow it out, and then he turns the weed burner on, and he just flames the hell out of his pot. Well, that dries it out so that it's stable enough that he can make these really huge round forms. And they do that multiple times. So I'm sure Pat wouldn't mind if we bought a weed burner.
Yeah, no fortune.
And a big propane tank. I mean, she wouldn't, you think, okay?
Hey, you wanna get one and bring it in? We'll watch.
But for example, if you have a heat gun, use that. Not a hairdryer, a heat gun.
What if we use a hairdryer?
Hmm?
What if you use a hairdryer?
You can, but I don't think it does anything.
No?
Yeah, I mean, it just,
Because that's all we have here.
It's not intense enough.
I know that,
I just don't wanna make it dirty.
but that's all we have.
yeah. In my experience, my students tried it, and they would be there for a half an hour, and nothing's really happened. A heat gun takes maybe a couple of minutes.
Yeah, it takes longer. Takes longer.
Yeah,
With
just,
the hairdryer.
you'll get there.
The hairdryer that time.
Yeah, you absolutely will get there.
I told Pat I bought myself a heat gun about a month ago, and I'm afraid to use it. I'm afraid I'll burn myself. Very, very hot. I know.
I mean, if you've never used a heat gun, when you're using the gun and you can see the orange reflection in the pot, yeah, it's a little disconcerting.
Yeah.
But just like anything else, be careful.
The other thing is you can't just set it anywhere.
Yeah, you have to be. I mean, you can get a cheap heat gun and they work fine. I have a good heat gun. I think it cost me $30 as opposed to $12. But mine, not only does it have a stand that I can set, it's built in. It just set it upside down, but it's got a heat setting and a just air setting, so it cools the elements down. So I mean, for $30, I've had it for 30 years. So
I think I bought your $12 one, but it cost me $19.
Inflation.
Exactly.
I don't think I'm adjusting for inflation. Bring this way in now.
Yeah, I like that.
See, I'm not doing this quickly at all, am I? Nice and slow. And I'm really working on this transition. That's really important because you don't want your bottle to go You want that, one of the things that make bottles attractive is that really graceful flowing shape that you can impart. Now this neck is really thick, but the thing about bottles, who's going to tell? I'm not going to tell. Okay, so what are some things that you can do? There's a couple things that you can do with a neck like this. See that? I can't see the damn shape.
It's roundish.
It's round. I can live with round it.
Well, a week or so ago, Jackie was using a good-sized mirror that she, what happened to it?
I think she brought it in.
Oh, I thought she said she found it here.
Okay, you'll notice that this is staying pretty centered, but if it gets knocked off,
He's still my beating heart. Don't do that.
it wants to be in the middle. So I mean, if it gets off center a little bit, but again, if you're over here, you really want to be. I mean, you don't have to be like this, but you don't want. If you do this, you really won't be able to tell. But I can just take this and see, and now I can. It's getting a little small for that hand position. So I'm just going to go to thumb and middle and index finger. And if you release it quickly, it's going to do that. if you release it slowly, more or less stay in the middle.
Gets much smaller than a ceramic oil can.
Okay, what do you do if you want it narrower than this? You can, you actually can fake everybody out, and you can make the neck solid, and just poke an air hole in the bottom, and know who's gonna know. But
Well, it is supposed to be a bottle, so if you try to put something in it.
so all I'm doing is pushing against this. And release it really slowly. And the narrower this gets, the more you really have to be gentle with it.
So you're just pushing with your thumb?
Yeah, I'm just pushing.
Now you're basically.
Yeah, I have found for me, and it's just for me, one finger doesn't work. I just can't get, so with two fingers here, I'm pushing like this, and it seems, for me, it's just easier. Did that get taller? Oh, it did.
Yes, it did.
Also
I
got a
said,
little wonky.
I don't do this often.
Kind of looking over like Dr. Seuss.
Yeah.
I can lay it over and be a pumpkin.
I haven't forgotten. Ye of little faith. Let's just drag on the. That's not very good.
Wow.
Now it's just the other side.
Now it needs to have an inch cut off. There you go.
But you still taught us how
We also learn how not to.
I'm purposely sort of taking this to extremes to show you that as it gets narrower and narrower and taller, it becomes increasingly difficult to control. So I wanted you to, that's normal. I'm going to send Pat the name of this YouTube guy from England that is amazing with his bottle. Anyway, so if I was going to save this, even with something this small, look at the difference between this and this. Now nothing's changed.
You could almost do that with any kind of cylinder
Well,
to thin and make the top.
You can, but keep in mind that this really only works effectively for a narrow neck like this, because you don't want the edges of anything else that I could think of to be that sharp edge. And keep in mind that one of the things that is going to happen if you have a hard edge like this, when you glaze it, the glaze is going to break on that edge. So it's going to be almost like somebody outlined that with a different color.
Wow.
Okay? Now, I'm rarely embarrassed. I'm not embarrassed, but some of you are going to know what I'm doing and don't say anything. For those that don't know, I'm going to show you the elephant. Okay, have you all seen the elephant?
You know?
You have? Oh. Your life is so narrow. Okay, elephant. Oh, Bill, you're such an idiot sometimes. Okay, what are we doing here? Mushroom. Elephant.
That's cute. Very cute.
But this is how I would make an elephant, don't you think?
Yeah.
Just need some.
You throw the bottom so it's round.
Right?
You've already, all you gotta put is, if you
Ears.
want tusks, get the used cones from the kiln. Make some eyes, throw some ears on it, you gotta, yeah. Okay. Make a pumpkin. Now, my pumpkins are very different. That, again, I'm not gonna butcher his name, but the Chinese potter, it's so good. I mean,
Yeah.
he makes pumpkins and I think they're terrible. I mean, it's quick for him to make. Might take a long time.
Maybe
But-
pumpkins in China look different.
You know, I can't pronounce his name, but he,
I know who you're talking about.
yes, he lives in San
Is it
Francisco.
The guy HSIN?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sin.
Shin.
I usually can spell it, but I can't pronounce it.
Yeah, I
That's
don't
not
know
true.
how to
I don't want to
butcher it.
mispronounce it,
Yeah,
so I just.
yeah.
I actually explored the possibility of going into business making pumpkins. What I was going to do is I was going to make maybe 10 different styles and shapes and then have molds made from those and slip
Ah,
cast them.
yeah.
Yeah.
But that sounded too much like work, so I didn't. This is the fast version. And this is one thing I absolutely need a mirror for, because you'll see what I've done. I really can't see the shape, not accurately. I remember what I do with this. I think I make an egg. Let's try that. So now I'm making no effort to make this thin. And honestly, my pumpkins were not thin. What's the why? I mean, is this pumpkin to be happier than this pumpkin? No.
Pumpkins are heavy. Real pumpkins are heavy, why not?
There.
You make them with seeds inside?
Hmm?
Do you make them with seeds inside?
That's what takes the 10 hours.
Well, okay. You remember you asked.
Never
So,
mind, Bill.
and I've told, if I've told you this story before, just remind me. But one of the hardest things to get teenagers to understand is the whole idea of pinch pots, because they're so rudimentary. I can do this in 5 seconds, Mr. B. Why do I want to do it again? And so I had to come up with a way to teach them how to make pinch pots. That was enjoyable, and I don't know how. I think it was actually my idea, which I tend to steal from other people. This might have been mine. But I came up with the idea of taking 2 pinch pots, putting together, making a pinch ball, and that evolved into pinch ball turning into jack-o'-lanterns. So I developed a special tool for putting the lines, a glaze for the pumpkins. And so that's what they made. Now, it was a 2-day demonstration. The first day I would show them how to make the sphere, and the second day I would show how to carve the lines and carve the top out and do the stem. So what I would do, and I had 5 periods, so I did 5 demonstrations of the pumpkin balls. I would take them home that night, get a pumpkin, take all the pumpkin goo, there it is, pumpkin tool, right there. You go, girl. So I would carve out the pumpkin goo from the real pumpkin, slice the pumpkins in half, put pumpkin goo inside the clay pumpkin,
Oh, yeah.
put them together, and take them to school the next day.
Surprise the heck out of the kids.
So I'm doing this, and you put the lines in. Okay, now I would ask them, what do you do when you have to cut the lid off? Oh, you do that? Okay, so I would do that, and what's next? Well, you scoop the seeds out. So I would take a spoon, and I would start scooping the seeds out of the can.
Very good.
Very cool.
As I said previously, I hate practical jokes. When you can get everybody, it's good fun.
Especially when it's
It got to the
teenagers.
point where when I was going to do this, all the administrators would come to my class just to Okay, so well, I'm going to make the pumpkin now. So I've left plenty of clay here. So what I'm going to do is just close it off. Using the same technique that I mentioned, remember? And there you go. Now, by doing that, now I've got trapped air in there. So now this ain't gonna collapse. And so if memory serves me, and it's been a few years since I've made a pumpkin, I start off with sort of this beehive shape, and then I would squash it, something like this. Yeah, like that.
The pumpkin is what you make when the bottle collapses.
There you go.
Or the elephant.
Or the elephant, right.
And what I would do then is I would trim it, I would bring the bottom in like this, so it looks like a regular pumpkin. And you end up, that's a little chubby. Thing about pumpkins, if you think you got a weird shape, go look at real pumpkins. And then what I would do is I would let it dry the next day, and I would get to them when they're leather hard-ish. I don't want them firm leather hard, because but now let's say it's the next day, then I would put a hole in it, bring this down, and then the stem would go there, and my lines would start to go like this.
All right.
Cool.
Right.
Great.
Okay.
How many lines does the pumpkin have?
So,
Funny you should ask. I should get a T-shirt, right? A lot. But what I realized very quickly is I couldn't duplicate that. So I went for a much more stylized pumpkin. You know the little one, the little gourds that look like little tiny smashed pumpkins, and the lines are very, very deep. That's sort of the look that I was going for. And I also found that most stems are a 5-pointed star in sort of a weird shape, but they tend to have 5 points. So just to make my life easier, I made 10 lines, and the stem had 5 points, and I could line up the stem with the line. So yeah. I'll tell you what, if you want to, it doesn't do you any good right now, but would you like to see one of the pumpkins? Or not? I can bring one in. It's not a big deal. Okay, I'll bring one in. I'll bring a couple bottles in too, even if I'm doing vases or something.
Yeah.
Okay, kids, does that work?
Thank you, Bill. Very good. Thank you. That's so